I would like to give you a way of thinking that has been enormously helpful to me, that came from the Good to Great research for dealing with great difficulty. And it was what we came to call the Stockdale paradox. And the Stockdale paradox was taught to us by Admiral Jim Stockdale.
Now, you may not know that Admiral Stockdale was the most senior naval officer held captive as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And during all that time, when he and his men were tortured and starved and threatened with death each and every day, Stockdale developed a fundamental principle that his men believed got them through that horror.
And I had the privilege to get to know Admiral Stockdale. And we were going to the faculty club one day, and I had read his book, In Love and War, which was written in alternating chapters by himself and his wife about their years when he was in the camp. And I got depressed reading the book because it seemed so bleak, it seemed so difficult, it seemed, it's like we can all endure anything if we know it's going to come to an end and we know when. But what if you don't know if it's ever going to come to an end? And you certainly don't know when. So I asked Admiral Stockdale how he dealt with that, and he said, you have to realize I never got depressed because I never, ever wavered in my faith that not only I would get out, but I would turn being in the camp into the defining event of my life that in retrospect I would not trade. Later, when we were up the hill, I asked him, I said, Admiral Stockdale, who didn't make it out as strong as you? And he said, easy, it was the optimists. I said, the optimists? You sounded optimistic. He said, no, I was not optimistic. I never wavered in my faith that I would prevail in the end, but I was not optimistic. I said, what's the difference? Oh, the optimists always thought we'd be out by Christmas. Of course, Christmas would come and it would go. And then we were going to be out by Easter and Thanksgiving, and then Christmas would come again, and they died of a broken heart. And that's when Admiral Stockdale grabbed me by the shoulders and said, this is what I learned. When you're imprisoned by great calamity, by great difficulty, by great uncertainty, you have to, on the one hand, never confuse the need for unwavering faith that you will find a way to prevail in the end, with, on the other hand, the discipline to confront the most brutal facts we actually face. And we're not getting out of here by Christmas. And that's when I learned the lesson from Admiral Stockdale. That you need, on the one hand, unwavering faith that you can and you will prevail in the end. And at the same time, you need the discipline to confront the brutal facts as they actually are.
You know that 35% of all U.S. dollars that have ever been printed were printed in the last 10 months.
Yep.
And they're showing this graph from it's Fred, and it's Economic Research, Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. And we can see 35% of all U.S. dollars.
Dude, this is a huge warning sign.
The things you see on the shelf right now were made a while ago. And so when you start seeing no one working, when the restaurants are now shut down in New York, you know what that means? A lot of things are going to happen. For one, when people aren't going to work, they aren't making things. So what's going to happen eventually is you're going to have a ridiculous amount of money from the US government being printed like crazy and nothing to buy with it. Check this out. From usdebtclock.org.
Oh, no.
They say the U.S. federal debt to GDP in 1980 was 34%. In 2000 was 55%, and now it's 128.6%.
All right, sounds like inflection has been reached.
If you would right now confiscate all the wealth of all the billionaires in the United States, you would still not have enough money to run the U.S. government for 1 year. And if you look at the dollar is as strong as it is mainly because of the U.S. military-industrial complex and its use of force all around the world to make sure that the world trades in the dollar. Now, when the dollar hyperinflates and when the dollar hits the fan, this is not only going to affect the United States, this is going to affect the entire world.
And while millions of Americans lost their livelihood in 2020, the rich only got richer. In fact, during lockdown, billionaires' wallets got fatter in pretty much every sector. Technology, healthcare, you name it. During lockdown, billionaire wealth rose to $10.2 trillion for the first time in history. But anyone with a pulse remembers that mom and pop shops were forced to limit their exposure to the public, often being pressured to shut their doors during the lockdown. While Jeff Bezos' Amazon has benefited from the pandemic more than any other retailer, because the government decided Amazon facilities were essential and sold essential items. Meanwhile, the mom and pop hardware store down the road, they had to close. Because the logic here is that germs don't live on cardboard Amazon boxes. That's why Bezos' wealth grew in dollars more than any other billionaire. And with this example, it's easy to see how a controlled demolition of small business took place. Amazon is a particularly good example since CEO Jeff Bezos purchased the Washington Post back in 2013. As we're all watching the greatest transfer of wealth in history take place while being told to stay inside to stop the spread. There is only one attitude, one line of thinking that is acceptable on this lockdown, which has been enforced by the media who just happens to be owned by the folks who are benefiting from the demolition of small business.
Stunning news that could blow up Joe Biden's campaign to become US president, beat Donald Trump. But news that Twitter and Facebook have gone to astonishing lengths, frightening lengths, to stop you reading. This is a big story, but when I tried to click on a link to Twitter, on Twitter to this story today, and I wouldn't have been the only one, millions would have done the same. This is what I and others saw. Warning, this link may be unsafe. The link you are trying to access has been identified by Twitter or our partners as being potentially spammy or unsafe. Unsafe what? Rubbish. Unsafe to Joe Biden, maybe. I pushed on, and this is what Twitter was trying to stop me and others from seeing, a story that was unsafe only for Joe and his son. But if you tried to retweet that story then, Twitter wouldn't let you. Your tweet could not be sent because Twitter said this link has been identified by Twitter or our partners as being potentially harmful. And do you know Facebook did much the same? It put out a post. This story is eligible to be fact-checked by Facebook's third-party fact-checking partners. In the meantime, we are reducing its distribution on our platform. Now, the excuses that Twitter and Facebook gave for this political censorship, let's be honest about it, that's all it is, political censorship.
If you ask 100 random people on the street what fascism is, despite the streets all being empty right now thanks to the coronavirus, I'd wager good money that you wouldn't get the correct answer back. To take the words straight from the potato's mouth, Mussolini said, fascism should rightly be called corporatism, as it is the merger of corporate and government power.
I don't think anyone expected a Biden administration to punish social media giants for censoring President Trump and his allies during the campaign, but now it looks like big tech will actually be rewarded for its election meddling. According to the Financial Times, Biden hired Jessica Hertz, former Associate General Counsel at Facebook, and Cynthia Hogan, former Apple Vice President for Government Affairs, for his transition team.
So wow, last week has been crazy. And we saw the great purge on social media where Trump and all of his supporters were essentially exiled from the digital world. Reddit has banned the subreddit group The Download. Twitch banned Trump's channel. Shopify took down all of Trump's online stores. Twitter permanently banned Trump's account with, I think it had over 90 million followers on there, along with his other close associates on there. Google pulled down Parler, which is a social media app for conservatives, whereas Twitter tends to be really more left-leaning for the Democrats. YouTube has accelerated enforcement action on election misinformation. Facebook banned Trump's account. Snapchat did as well. TikTok has been removing any hashtags like Storm the Capitol, Patriot Party. Apple suspended Parler from the Apple App Store. Google did as well. Discord banned the server The Download so that there's no more discussions on this. Pinterest has been limiting hashtags. Amazon AWS ceased hosting the Parler app, taking it offline, and then Stripe is no longer processing payments for Trump's campaign, which really limits its fundraising capabilities. And hey, that's just the start. There's going to be more to come. Doesn't it concern you that what if one day, maybe 10, 20 years from now, there were a presidential-elect candidate who's trying to run for office who says that he wants to dismantle the big tech companies because they have too much power. And then the tech companies can just say, okay, we're just going to silence you because you're not going to help us out, you're not going to support us, so we're just not going to let you use any of our tech services and essentially silence you. And you won't be able to build up a digital campaign this way. And this just may be an inordinate amount of power that these tech companies have in an age where everything is digital.
And this has been, of course, cheered by all sorts of people who, see only if this is bad for Trump, then I like it. Who are, of course,
somehow forgetting that censorship that you like is always followed by censorship that you don't.
My goodness, is this going to be used in ways that you don't like down the road? And there's a question about why it's happening in the way it is. Of course, many of the people who are being tossed off the major platforms are conservatives. And the problem is that lulls a lot of people who are not conservatives into imagining that whatever is going on is an academic concern because it won't come for them. But
right.
Let me point out a couple things about it. One, this is a screenshot from today of the Articles of Unity Twitter account. The Articles of Unity Twitter account was the official account of the Unity movement that at the time was advancing a plan to fend off both the Republicans and the Democrats and put the presidency in the hands of a left-right partnership team that would be above politics and non-ideological. Here's the point. If you think that this censorious instinct of Twitter and Facebook and Google is about people whose beliefs we all understand to be anathema, wrong, dangerous, etc., then you need to grapple with the fact that it is only months ago that these very same entities took up arms against a decidedly nonpartisan, non-ideological effort. This account was suspended without a justifiable explanation and remains so to this day, right? That tells you something. Now, while it's going to tell you what it's doing is getting rid of dangerous conservatives who are espousing views that will cause people, will cause harm, what it is really doing is getting rid of people that are inconvenient for it.
Those groups need to be treated like ISIS, effectively. I think we got to do a couple things. One, there needs to be an intentional work by the social media companies collaborating together to work on violent extremism in the same way they worked on ISIS. Now we're talking about domestic audience in the United States, and we have to turn down the capability of these conservative influencers to reach these huge audiences.
Can we just accept that the post 9/11 era is over? We are in a new era, right? We had a generational event with the infiltration of the Capitol. And the era of the primary threats to the United States being external, right? Threats coming from abroad, from foreign terrorist organizations, from China, from Russia, they're still serious. But the single greatest national security threat right now is our internal division. It's the threat of domestic terrorism.
And one, I find, totally appropriate response to this is from a woman named Whitney Webb, I don't know her, who quote tweets Slotkin, again, the current House representative who was a CIA analyst. Webb says, before Congress, Alyssa worked for the CIA and the Pentagon and helped destabilize the Middle East during the Bush and Obama administrations. What she says here is essentially an open announcement that the U.S. has moved from the war on foreign terror to the war on domestic terror. This is terrifying.
Terrorism is a special word. Every time you hear somebody invoke it, you really need to ask the question whether or not they're invoking it because the thing that they're pointing it at is clearly terrorism, or they're invoking it because of all of the things it allows them to do next. And that's the thing that worries me most.
So to understand what's happening and what's going to happen, well, we're in the peak moment of the Empire Strikes Back. And they're going to strike back by every method, mechanism, and means they know to man.
I always carry this image in my mind of Admiral Stockdale saying, we're not going to be out of here by Christmas. Deal with it.
So, very, very scary document. You can see it's amazing how close Orwell got it. But I do believe that in the battle of good versus evil and light versus dark and truth versus lie, I believe that truth and light and good will prevail, but there may be times of darkness, and for those times we will be ready. And we may have to go underground at some point, but we will never surrender, and we will never submit to tyranny. Discipline equals freedom, and freedom will overcome all.
Look at world history. We have every reason to be optimistic. Be pessimistic about what's coming in the short term, but be optimistic about our human capacity to resist it. But for those who are also feeling down or discouraged or depressed, all great hero stories require a tough second act. So that's the whole point. The odds look bad. So everybody that's ever wanted to be a hero, you need a villain. The odds need to be tough. The night needs to look dark for the light to have real meaning. What is faith without doubt, after all? There's no great hero story that doesn't have a major point of crisis and a major villain to oppose. So the fact that we have some villainy on the rise and a major crisis that we're confronting just presents an opportunity for all of us to act in a heroic fashion, and we still can.
And the cornerstone of Epictetus' philosophy is that a wise person has two files in their mind. One for things that they can control, and two for things that they can't control. And the wise person, the Stoic philosopher, does not put their attention on the things they cannot control. They do not complain about those things. They put all of their attention on the things within their control. Their thoughts, their behaviors, their responses to what's happening.
Now, I often tell people too, fix the things you repeat every day, because people tend to think of those as trivial. Well, those probably constitute 50% of your life. And people think, well, they're mundane, I don't need to pay attention to them. It's like, no, that's exactly wrong. The things you do every day, those are the most important things you do. What I've recommended to people is clean up your room. That's a good start. Organize your local landscape. Schedule your time. Start taking control of yourself. I would say that's where people should start. You start small. Your room is an externalization of your mind. To the degree that you're in your room, the room is you. It's actually you. There's no difference between the chaos that's outside of you in a place that you spend as much time as you spend in your room and the chaos that's internal psychologically. And, one of the things I often do when I'm first dealing with my clients as a simple exercise in setting themselves right psychologically is to have them start to clean up their external environment, because people know how to do that. And there's no difference between that and putting yourself straight psychologically.
Alan Law says, squat 2 times body weight and a bunch of life's problems go away. The mindset gained along the way improves every aspect of life. Gyms make better people who will go on to make a better world.
He's got a point. It's, physical fitness and getting in the gym and doing challenging physical tasks translate to mental toughness. Any challenging task like that, where you're forced to focus, you're forced to work very hard day in, day out, it teaches you a lot, and you walk away with a lot mentally from that. People, especially newcomers, have this idea that everything needs to be accomplished on day one. Yeah. And you can draw that parallel even outside the gym. Anything constructive you want to do, it's baby steps. It's one thing. Show up.
Don't lose hope. If you study history, and even when countries have fallen into full communism, sometimes it did last a while, but they pulled out of it. And really, for communism to actually win, right? The thing that it tries to stamp out is belief and faith. After Lenin did his Bolshevik revolution, one of the first things he stated when they had the famine sweeping across Russia, you know what he stated? He said, "Good," right? He said that the famine is good. The famine that killed millions of people in Russia. He said it was good, and he said it was good because it, quote, would destroy not only people's faith in the Tsar but in God too. Right. One of the main goals of communism is to destroy your faith, to make you lose hope. That is what they want. Now, how do you push back against that? You do not lose your faith. You do not silence yourself. You maintain your own values. Your spirit is not destroyed.
Exactly. The two things the bad actors in the system want people to do is to feel such futility that they either lash out and do something stupid and violent that's self-destructive of everything they care about, or to make the mistake of, I can't change anything, and so I'm just going to quit and forfeit and go home. And the reality is that ordinary people collectively have the power. The system only succeeds if people forget the power that they have. But the reality is the only way the system changes is enough people believe they can make a difference. And that's how it happens. And
it's when you take on City Hall, it's a 12-round fight. And it's the 12-round Rocky story where you're going to get your face bashed in for 11 rounds straight. And all you got to do is stay on your feet long enough to get to the end to where you inspire enough people and you've made enough of a splash and an impact that it's a domino effect, and you get to the end, because all it takes is that, in the Rocky story, it takes that one, bob and weave and that one good punch, and you can take the whole thing down. But it's not falling into the traps that they're going to set for you. And they want that. They want the violence. They want the unrest. They want people to go crazy, because then they can say, look at them. Look at these crazy people over here. And that's what happened at the Capitol. Whether we have all the details or not, that's and they'll use that against you. So you have to stay calm and you have to stay optimistic.
So I see this as a great opportunity where the real resistance begins now, not the fake corporate sponsored Nike backed one of the last 4 years. So and it's going to be interesting.
Stand up straight and march forward. And give someone else some encouragement. Let them see you standing strong. Set an example. And if you set an example, if you lead, you know what? Other people will join in. The fortitude will spread. The cadence will align, the movement will grow, and we will march forward. We will march forward together into the future. Into 2021 with our heads held high. Ready for whatever comes our way. And by our very posture, by our very being, we will let the world know that we are here to win. Happy New Year, everybody. And stand by to get some.